Welcome in to the RotoViz Basketball Show. My name is Colm Kelly. I'm joined by Kevin Szafraniec. We're going to talk through should you draft rookies or should you avoid them in your fantasy football drafts. We're also going to talk a little about some of the work Kevin has done up on rotoviz.com looking at some rookies and their potential upside or downside for their range of outcomes as a rookie and then I guess into their NFL career, but we're looking at it more so from this season perspective. We're then going to jump into a BBM5 draft and attempt to take down the entire contest, which would obviously be everyone who's drafting his goal at this time of the year. But we are really closing in on the NFL season. I was going through my scheduling over the next kind of 2 to 3 weeks because then we are at the season. But I haven't announced this on any of the podcasts yet, but I may as well say it now that we're due to have our second child at the very start of September. 2 days post NFL week 1 is the current outlook. So it will be a busy time of year for myself, but trying to fit in all those drafts and other events that are going on around the time. I was starting to get a little bit anxious when I was seeing how little time was left to fill in all these drafts. So I'm excited to draft this one along with Kevin. We're hoping to do another one of these next week as well as we get ready to give our all to win BBM 5 here with Underdog Fantasy. But we are going to draft that in a few moments. But, I was talking to Kevin before we kicked off. The news going around over the last couple of days with, social media and the quickness that reports come out throughout injuries. And, you can be on social media or Twitter, for example, and be getting this information very quickly, which is advantageous. But then if you get bad news, you can kind of doom scroll to try and get the latest updates. And even before we talked, Kevin, it feels like you didn't see all the news in the evening time, which is very much beneficial for you because you didn't have to worry as much about Jordan Addison and the potential season-ending injury that it sounded like he had. We've seen this with Tyrone Tracy over the last couple of days. We've seen it a couple of times, and thankfully the reports are that he's not going to train tomorrow, but it looks like it's going to be a less of a long-term issue for him, which is obviously very positive. When we look at these things, so like we didn't have much news coming out about JJ McCarthy, and then his knees getting looked at, then 24 hours later, he's out for the rest of the season. So it's hard to balance out. But sometimes the best thing you can do, and I mentioned this on a recent RotoViz overtime, is check out social media, in the morning, maybe check it out in the evening. Try to not just stay checking out the information as things go. And I think you'll feel better for it at the end of the day. But unless you're drafting during the day, you need to keep up to date with the information. But Kevin, how are you feeling as we're getting ready to jump in here to a draft? We're also, as I mentioned, going to talk about some of your rookie conversation. But before we get into the rookie conversation, are you excited to draft here today? And how's your early portion of the week been going?
Oh, it's been going great. Congratulations on you. This is going to be the one, Colm. You need that money to take care of the kids, man. So this is it, man. Yeah. This is the one,
This is the baby fund.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we are going to have to decide if the rookies are going to be able to help us do that. And, for long-term RotoViz subscribers or listeners of content on RotoViz Radio, they will know that something that we do promote or talk about is the benefit of the rookies and also particularly second-year players and, how they can make that second-year leap. But the first leap is from college to the NFL. And something that I've talked to quite a few people who are maybe less experienced drafters or even experienced drafters over the past 12 months have been around the fact that, I haven't seen them do it yet at the NFL, or I want to see them do it before I draft them. And the biggest thing I've been telling people is once you see them do it, you can no longer draft them onto the same roster because they become so expensive. So being able to get in on the ground floor and get these players onto your rosters, even if it feels expensive, is still, I think, a very plus EV decision. The other part that we talk about with this is like pre-NFL draft when these contests are opened. Drafting rookies before they get drafted is all often one of the points where they can jump in value as well. So getting rookies on at multiple points of the season is advantageous. But for you, Kevin, I guess we can go into the articles as well. Is it like there's obviously the profiles of rookies. There's certain rookies that I've drafted either very little of or not much at all, but there's other rookies this season. I was joking with you before we started. I looked at my FFPC account. I'm up to over 60% exposure to Xavier Worthy. So there is certain rookies. My three top exposures on the FFPC site at the moment are Worthy, Bo Nix, and Brock Bowers. So like I'm drafting the rookies. Are you drafting the rookies, and should people listening and be avoiding the rookies or drafting the rookies?
Well, of course, I mean, working for RotoViz and being a longtime reader, I'm always all over the rookies. Before I hype up my own pieces, Michael Dubner just put out an awesome article. I think it just dropped yesterday. So for anybody who wants to know where we should be drafting our rookies, and go read that right now. Before you do another draft, go read that. And hopefully we can implement some of that in our draft today as well.
Absolutely.
And really, so the last series that I just did for the site was about polarizing, or rookies with polarizing profiles, guys that either maybe didn't do it, or there's some just odd aspects of their profiles, and they were really guys that I was kind of on the fence one way or the other. And basically, like I say, generally when I do these articles, I feel like if I have questions about them, readers will have questions about them as well. So basically, there was just 4 players that they're all wide receivers that I went and looked into. I won't kind of give you the names, but I can tell you the upside cases for them were Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, and
our boy
T. Higgins.
T. Higgins.
Yeah, and their boy T. Higgins. So those are the upside cases for them, and there's pluses and minuses to all of them. And I can say that generally on 3 of the players, I felt pretty optimistic after doing the research and going into the tools and kind of looking at their profiles. I felt fairly optimistic, and then there was one that I was kind of like, and I kind of stepped back on. And there's actually another player on his team who I feel like had a very similar profile and maybe a better pick, and the guy's basically going undrafted. So just as a little teaser, that's kind of where I'm at on those updates. And coming up, I'm going to be just continuing to just kind of look at some rookie profiles going forward as we head towards the season.
The interesting thing with the rookies is even some of the names that you mentioned, and I'm not going to give away the names either, but that you highlighted in those pieces, the names, even if they're players who I'm not in on, I still think a lot of these players at ADP are very well priced in terms of there's still a lot of upside, just not as much upside as the same kind of cohort that I'm looking to target in those drafts. We will talk about the guys that we're looking to target in this draft. I would be shocked if we don't come out of this draft with a good few rookies on it, or at minimum second-year players, third-year players, usually a young profile of squad we'll put together. Mm-hmm. So we will jump into the draft. How are we looking? Are we filled yet?
Yep, and we got the 101. So here we go.
We got the 101. It's all kicking off. We had some technical issues starting this up to make sure that we got into Kevin's account and got the draft up and loading, which meant that we recorded just a couple of minutes later. But we joked then that this was the one because we had to work to get into the room. We get in at the 101. How much better could it get? The interesting thing I want to talk to you here about the 101 is CeeDee Lamb would have been my regular target here at the 101. Christian McCaffrey, slight injury. No real concerns from me on it at the moment. Obviously, there's a chance of re-aggravation and things like that, but week 1 not in question. But CeeDee Lamb holding out. You get Tyreek Hill, who I think is very, very interesting as the 101 as well. So I've gone Lamb most of the time. I'm open to Hill. What way do you want to play this? I'm leaning Lamb or Hill unless you want to go with CMC.
I think CD would be a good pick just for the fact that it's a little discouraging that he's not in camp yet, but I think CD's a good pick here. Just because
you don't have to convince me. Good pick. It's like they're all 3 of those guys for me are in a top tier. Jamar Chase is right there as well, but I'm leaning the other ways. I've talked about this as well. Sometimes you might get a Chase to fall a couple of picks to 5 or 6, where you're not getting those guys in general to fall into that range. So Lamb starting off. The one thing I do like when you start off with those 3 guys, I find that a lot of the targets that I have, there's a lot of week 12 week 12 buys. There's a lot of week 14 buys that I'm drafting. And sometimes when you get into those guys in round 1, like if it is a Chase, for example, or if it's Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave, Drake London, all those guys, I know that's only in the first 2 rounds, but you start to move down through the ranks and through the rounds, and it can be hard to balance it out. Sometimes you might have to pass over a player, as you're trying to balance those bye weeks out. I'm going to ask you this. I've been having a lot of fun. Myself and Sean try to balance the bye weeks quite a bit. Sean, I think more so, that's Sean Siegel, more so than myself. But I like when I'm doing the drafts, and I'm doing a lot of slow drafts with different, friends around the industry at the moment. But Connor O'Driscoll, who writes for RotoViz, is having a really good laugh at me every time I mention, like, what about week 14 when we have, so many players being drafted in that? And he's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I had a team that I drafted. I think I had 7 week 10s out of 20 players in the FFPC yesterday, and I was kind of like, maybe that's a bit too much, and he was just like, I don't even look at it. So how are you dealing with these bye weeks? The one advantage of if they're all off that 1 week, they're playing all the other weeks. But I like to try and craft a team in those early rounds where you have more flexibility as the draft goes on.
And I say, just to hype another article up on the site, Jake Bowes just put the next piece for his BBM simulation, where he did over 12 million BBM teams, and that is
only 12 million.
They only 12 million. So I mean, maybe next year you could get to 24, but but I mean, it literally goes into like, how much do bye weeks matter? How much does taking zeros for weeks matter? Because one of the big things, and I talked to Blair about this, is I was a big week 14 bye, like with Lamar, Anthony Richardson, Jaden Daniels, CJ Stroud. They all have week 14 buys, and those were all guys that I wanted to target and like at least get some of and stack them together. But I'm like, is this really going to be like a death sentence for my best ball teams if I pick two of these guys? And obviously, you're not going to go 3 QBs in that situation. So it's for anybody that hasn't read that yet, go check that out, because it answers a lot of that question. And he introduces a new like a zero metric. It's basically just telling you like how much zeros like will affect your best ball teams. So I do.
And the reason that I put it into focus so much is, let's say you draft a team that is heavily leaning towards one bye week, but then if it has 5 running backs and 2 of those have a week 14, like if one of those other 3 are even injured at that point, like you can really struggle to fill out lineups. And it's not just like I have 18 spots to draft here and I can balance it out as it goes. It's also factoring in like injuries, missing weeks, all those sort of things. And I just think that little bit, it's another little edge. It's not a huge thing, but it's another little bit. So we are 4 picks away. I mentioned players a moment ago, and I mentioned Chris Olave, thinking that he probably won't scrape his way back to us. He doesn't. He did go. So we are 3 picks away. Malik Neighbors would be somebody that I would probably pitch for here on this crew of players. And then I'm probably down to Devontae Smith. Who are you generally drafting in this particular area? Again, going for those younger names. It would fit with our rookie conversation here to get him if he comes to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Malik Neighbors is one of my highest, at least in the early rounds. I think he is my highest owned player. So I'm always down for drafting Malik Neighbors, and then say Devontae's got the week 17 correlation with CD. So I'd be okay with that. And I've also been happy taking Ayuk now. Like, my gut is that he's going to stay in San Francisco, and he was like an early 2nd round pick, and now he's fallen to the early 3rd a lot of the time. So, and there we go. Ship me the monies.
Yeah, takes Neighbors. So that leads us up to the options. I think we can put them in the queue. Devontae probably becomes the priority for me, and I do think that the concern here with Ayuk is, if he did get traded, that he goes into a worse situation. I'm willing to take the risk here, unless you have a name that you want to pitch over him. I'm good to take those 2 guys, but we can have a think here on the second one as we have a few moments on the clock.
The only other guy, I mean, he's an older guy, but Cooper Kupp. I mean, I'm so on, but I mean, I'm happy taking Ayuk here.
Yeah, again, I like Kupp, earlier this offseason at those prices, which I thought were ridiculous, but now we're starting to come into the early 3rd, late 2nd range, and I think that we're pushing it a bit much there. Not that he won't do that, but I'm going to go with Ayuk. The Ayuk one, if he does stay, is obviously a nice discount from where he was earlier this offseason, but there is still that fear in me that he goes. But I still think even if he was to go to, let's say, the Steelers, wouldn't be ideal. But I think, mid 3rd to late 3rd is probably where he couldn't go past. Like there's a certain tier of wide receiver he has to stay above. But if I was earlier this offseason, I was drafting Deebo Samuel over Ayuk at Samuel's ADP, so because you were getting him 2nd, it was cheaper. And now they have flipped ADP. I'm probably going to, like, I would still rather have Samuel out of the 2, but I do like Ayuk, and especially if he stays with the 49ers. Did get a couple of questions in here from Henry. One of them is on well, there's a couple of them. He mentions passing on CMC. He says, bold move. Let's see how it works out in 5 months. But the other one was about Olave. Passed up on Chris Olave and BBM5 last night himself at the 303. He mentioned he's not excited about Olave and Carr's offense on a crappy team. And the other one was, are we sure that Ayuk is staying? San Francisco is to pay him the money, or Pitt is getting him? The deal is done if San Francisco can't sign him. Well, there is an alternative option in that. There's the case that they do not sign him long term and keep him this season and lose him down the line in terms of trying to go in for a championship this year. So there is a third option in that. The reports this afternoon seem to be that there is signs towards him potentially staying, and the longer this rumbles on, that is the likely outcome. I feel I've never swayed too much on which way it will land, but I still think if he ends up with the Steelers, you're in a situation here where like Michael Pittman's after getting drafted. Like I see him probably getting to that spot and no further if he did go. So I don't think you're losing too much by drafting him at the point he is, and you're getting a 10 pick discount from where he was going earlier this offseason. The other part was the Olave at 303. I do think that Olave is just an incredibly talented wide receiver. If you could put him in an offense with Patrick Mahomes, would I rather it? Yes, very much so. But if you're in a situation where you're the lead wide receiver on that, and you get to play in a dome, there's less weather concerns. There is a balance to it, and I think that offense will be substantially better this season. And I've mentioned this a good few times as well. There's a huge amount of plays last year which were, I would say, like inches away from being massive completions or deep touchdowns to Chris Olave, and it reminded me so much of my frustration watching the Green Bay Packers, who I'm a fan of early last season with Jordan Love, where deep shots to the playmakers, and they're all like within one hand length away. The timing and the sync just wasn't exactly there, and I think that we can see those things work out for Olave this season. I just think he's a real high upside talent. I answered both of those questions. Any of them you want to take, or any different thoughts that you have on those situations?
Well, I've been kind of going back and forth on looking more into the Saints, because I just feel like that's finally, after years and years of them being in like cap hell and kind of working through it, I feel like that's finally a situation that's like just ready to explode this year. I've never been a big Carr fan, like, ever.
Me either.
And and I know that like Olave played better with Winston.
And a
last
bit
year.
of this is that like it's a bet on Olave rather than a bet on Carr. Like we're looking
Absolutely.
here, we're looking at Justin Jefferson. We're not saying like, oh, Sam Darnold in this situation is going to elevate his play. It's like it's Justin Jefferson. He's one of the best wide receivers we've ever seen to this early point of his career in the NFL. You're betting on that talent rather than specifically the quarterback up. There's going to be plays where the quarterback leaves things on the field, but we've seen that with Kirk Cousins for season upon season when he's playing with Justin Jefferson as well.
And and I always say the talent's going to win out. I love taking the discounts on, like you guys were on, you and Sean on OT were on the Seahawks a couple years ago, and everybody thought they were going to be terrible. Last offseason, everybody thought the Buccaneers with Baker were just going to, nosedive, and it ended up working pretty well. So like, I feel the same, like the Olave's talent will win out, but I've been basically going like Rattler and Superflex, trying to like just thinking that he's the rookie. They're going to give him a shot if everything falls apart, and he's available generally in the last round as a quarterback in Superflex. And I've been taking a lot of chances on him. So that's a situation I literally feel like that offense is going to explode in a bad way.
Yeah, so you definitely agree on the team scenario there. We are one pick away here from getting T. Higgins. I would love this one to scrape back through if it could. We lost out. I think this drafter shipped me the monies is going to be pretty sharp here and potentially take him. He did just snipe us that time earlier on Neighbors. He does pass like Josh Jacobs. So I think Higgins is the auto click. The second one a little bit more up in the air for me, so we can let Higgins run through a little bit of time here. But Mark Andrews, Kincaid, Keenan Allen, they're probably some of the names that I'm looking at here that are of most interest. Any other names standing out for you?
Yeah, I wasn't taking really any Pickens at all earlier in the offseason. I've started taking him a little bit more, but I mean, generally he's not. I still don't ever feel like super great about taking him. I right now, I would probably say like Kincaid or maybe even McLaurin if we're going to try to set up a stack,
Well,
commander
I would
stack.
I would be much more Andrews or Kincaid, and I'm good to go
Okay.
with Kincaid over Andrews here.
Okay.
If you want to go Kincaid, Allen's the player that I otherwise, but I think getting the elite tight end here is the play.
Yeah, I do too. So we can go with Kincaid.
Would you be I'm on the Kincaid side over Andrews, but it's close for me. Like if Kincaid had gone, I would take Andrews. If Andrews had gone,
Mhm.
well, I'm taking Kincaid anyway. But Mark Andrews had a car accident on the way to camp today, but everything seems to be okay. So the news cycle this time of year is pretty pretty scary for fantasy football and NFL fans. Um, but have you those guys much apart? Or is it pretty close? Is it just that you have a preference for Kincaid? If Kincaid wasn't there, would you go for Andrews, or are you waiting then to try and get to Kyle Pitts, who would be the next tight end?
I
What's your
take them
thought of
both
tight end?
about the same
About the
clip. A lot of
same,
the
yeah,
times I'm
yeah,
more looking for the Andrews and Lamar stack. That's generally, if that's there, I'll grab that. If I feel like that's a possibility, that's generally when I'll grab Andrews, and it's there fairly regularly. So I'll consider so it generally works out. I think I'm actually my exposure's higher on Kincaid, but not by a ton.
yeah. That would be the way I would be kind of playing it. Prefer Kincaid, but trying to get both. And luckily enough, I'm getting Kincaid most of those times. When we look at the other players that are coming up here, one of the I'm hoping that this works out and gets back. I have no faith that it will. But Jaden Reed was a name I would have kind of
Hmm.
went down after that, and the other one is Worthy, who I mentioned earlier in the show. He's by far my priority target. I don't expect him to come back, but yeah, that one will hurt when it goes off the board.
Mhm.
The other note that we're getting some comments in here, like the draft is playing out quite
Mhm.
interestingly. Higgins getting back to the turn there was something I wasn't expecting either. So if we can somehow sneak Worthy back to the turn, that would be incredible. But yeah,
Absolutely.
very little hope in that happening. And we'll see what options come up here. Maybe it's a case that if we see like a George Kittle make it back, that maybe we should have went with Reader Worthy and then took maybe Kittle on the way back. But we'll see how it plays out. That's the tricky thing about the turn picks is you are kind of having to make those decisions, within 20 picks to the next selection. And it can be quite tricky. But through those opening 5 picks, very pleased with how this draft has gone so far. So we can't really give out too much about what has happened. How are you
Yeah,
feeling
absolutely.
those opening 4 wide receivers and the tight end?
Say this is pretty typical for me. I mean, I love, T. Higgins was going in the second round last year. I feel like he may even be better this year. So like, I feel like Burrow, I think Cincinnati's making it a point to try to get out of the gate fast because it seems like they always kind of start slow. So I think Higgins is going to have a big year. I've been drafting a ton of them, and then everybody else, obviously, Devontae, Ayuk, Lamb. You can't really go wrong with those three guys. So I mean, I'm kind of just looking at how things are shaking out. I kind of hope maybe we can reference one of Blair's articles from earlier in the season and maybe do some strategy going with that. But we'll see how it
Yes.
shapes out.
Yeah, we got a heavy wide receiver round here so far, and at that turn, there's kind of a number of players of interest. I mentioned Jaden Reed, Worthy went, Allen went. The Worthy pick going to the Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey drafter, so a nice Chiefs stack kicking things off there. Um, yeah, it hurts every time that I see Worthy go off the board, and it's not to my team, but
Mhm.
I can't. I know that I can't have 100% exposure. Have to keep these things under control. But we'll see now how these spells go. Deontay Johnson is somebody that I've added into some drafts. We are 6 picks away. I think him and Kittle probably go before it gets back to us. Christian
Mhm.
Watson is someone
Yeah.
I'm starting to add in a lot more. But JSN then would be the other pick. How do you feel here? If we get to the turn, I feel like we could really take advantage potentially before that wide receiver cliff if we were able to get
Mhm.
a JSN and a Christian Watson, for example, on this roster. I think would really set us up at wide receiver, but would mean that we're probably pushing QB a little bit further down the line.
Yeah, which I'm totally okay with. They say I was not even like Lad. I was not on early in the season, so I've been kind of playing catch up on him a little bit. because I think, I mean, he will probably be the guy in that offense. I know he has like a lower leg injury, but I'm more or less playing catch up with guys when I go through my exposures and see that I'm maybe a little lighter on him than I would be. I'm sure I'm not at the market on Ladd, so I'm okay with him too. But obviously JSN's my number one most drafted guy, so I'm always okay with taking JSN.
Yeah, and so put JSN and star him. The question mark then becomes like, do we really want to push it at wide receiver? CJ Stroud is here, Kyler Murray's here. I'm okay passing a quarterback based on what we have potentially as stacks, but I think it'll be wide receiver. James Conner, somebody I'm drafting quite a bit of in those zero RB drafts as well. But I'm okay to push running back here, get ourselves up to those 6 wide receivers, and I think we have huge firepower in that room to see what comes back to us then. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I feel good. It's just more of picking, is Watson your preferred target
Yeah,
right now?
Watson will be my preferred.
Yeah, I haven't been drafting him as much, so I would like to get back up on him a little more. And then even like earlier in the offseason with Jake Bose's articles, and I know Sean's talked about on OT and everything is, you can roll with 6 wide receivers if you get them early enough, and that's kind
Yeah,
of where we're at now. So, and I
that
always get a
is
little
where we're at.
scared.
Yeah.
I get a little scared. I've done it sometimes. Like at first, I was just very, very nervous and anxious. But if the data supports it, and somebody like Sean's pushing it, as well as like Jake, has done all this research, like there's something behind it. So even though it's a little nerve wracking for someone who just is used to drafting at least 8 wide receivers, 7 wide receivers, it's the 6 is a little rough.
It all depends now how it goes. Like if it comes back at the next turn, for example, and we get somebody who feels like a foundational potential option. Like we're in the 7th round here at the moment. Underdog ADP. Like when we get to even round 9, like you're looking at round 9, Chase Brown, Javonte Williams into round 10, Tyjae Spears, Devin Singletary. And sorry, I did skip over Zach Moss, Tony Pollard, and Brian Robinson. The reason I skipped the prime targets for me are those other names that I mentioned. Yeah. But we're going to be in a situation here where there's even a potential that a Brock Bowers might sneak his way back to us, and I would potentially go that direction too. But if we get back and it's a case that you get Chase Brown and Javonte Williams, or Javonte Williams and Tyjae Spears, even if you're going a little bit earlier than ADP, then you're into 2 running backs who you feel have like standalone value week 1 and have upside built in. So I think that if that happens, and particularly one of the ways that it could work out in your favor having a turn pick like the 101 is if those guys sneak their way back, you can like double tap the running back position then at that point. So it sometimes will work out. There's a chance here we get completely caught. But the reason I'm mentioning those names is if you get 2 of those, it doesn't mean that then you need like to really lump into the running back position. You may be able to balance it out as the draft goes along and still go and get your quarterbacks in the window and balance it out. So that would be my hope here, is that we get probably 2 of those round 9 guys at the 8-9 turn, and then we see where we play it from there, and kind of take some of those quarterback values. Maybe like sometimes when you're in drafts like this, we see quarterbacks going all sorts of different ways. But if you get one where everyone's kind of balanced a quarterback in this draft, we can see that we have no quarterback. Team 2 has no quarterback. Team 3 has no quarterback. Team 11 and Team 10 have no quarterback. So it isn't very balanced so far. But if we get to round 11 and it's kind of like all those guys have 1 or 2, that means then that the need for them to push on to get the next quarterback sometimes allows guys to maybe slip around or so, and you can get players onto your roster from that perspective that you're getting a little bit of a discount as well. So we'll see what happens. We did get Warren, Stevenson, and Harris going off the board back to back at the end of the 7th. But yeah, are you kind of thinking of it the same way? Those names that I mentioned, are they running backs that you're targeting? Or are you maybe more in on a like Brian Robinson, somebody that I know some of my other friends in the industry really, really like, but I just have a priority for Javonte over him, for example? How are you looking at those guys?
I've been trying to get a lot of equal exposure to a lot of those guys in that area. I've been drafting Robinson just because I have a lot of I like Robinson's potential If you think about like when Cliff Kingsbury went to Arizona, I mean, James Conner was not super highly sought after. And it's kind of feels like a similar situation where, like I think they had Chase Edmonds at the time. And then I feel like Austin Eckler is the Chase Edmonds of that Washington, Commanders backfield. That he's just not really going to take as much work away, I guess, from Robinson. So I do like Robinson. I like Javonte. Chase Brown, obviously. I've been drafting a ton of Chase Brown. Haven't really drafted any Zach Moss this year, so all the hype for him has really been exciting for me because I literally, if it flipped the other way, I'd probably be crying. So,
And have you been taking any Eckler at all?
A little bit. I think I've taken maybe Tim twice in the past week, and I don't think I took him at all.
I think I've taken him 0 times.
Yeah, I just more of when I had Jaden Daniels and he was there, and I needed running backs, and I said, okay, why not? And it's generally not in BBMs. It'll be in like a $7. I don't know if that's a poodle or something where it's a little cheaper. The price point isn't as high.
It'll be interesting to see with the Addison injury, and obviously it's sounding more positive now as we even record this. How much he would slide. This is just shortly after his ADP. It will not be in the conversation for him, I don't think, because you probably want to get a discount on him, and I can't see him falling another 22 picks. Mm-hmm. But we are in an interesting spot with those running backs that I mentioned. Most of them still available. We're 2 picks away. The other one then is we do have some quarterbacks that could fit in. We have Jordan Love, Joe Burrow could fit in on this roster. We have CeeDee Lamb. Do we want to get a quarterback here, or do you want to go ahead? We do see Burrow going 1 pick before.
Yeah, working these turns is kind of rough because usually I'll push quarterback, and usually you can get them to fall around or so. Yeah. But just us being at the turn, there's no way like Love comes back to us.
So yeah, I think we probably push it and see where somebody like Gino is probably. Some of those later guys. I'm good getting 3 quarterbacks later if we want to do that. Yeah. Chase Brown will be my pick. Because we've pushed it, Jonathan Brooks is like a rookie for late season with the injury. You can draft Chase Brown. Yeah, we're good at that. Yeah. But I have drafted a lot of them. I've kind of tapered off a little bit with the injury concerns. But my next pick would be either Brooks, Williams, or Singletary or Spears. Have you, out of those guys, have you a preference? Do you want to go with Brooks and see maybe if one of the other ones somehow would sneak through? I don't think they will, but
so what I think, I mean, with Brooks, since we're kind of, maybe we draft a little more wide receiver, we can load up with, we can have that luxury pick of having Brooks on our team, even if he misses a little bit of time to start and comes on down the stretch.
And we're telling people that we should draft rookies, so we have to we have to do what we say. Is that that's number one? That's actually the first rookie that we've got on the roster. So, we wouldn't really be like telling the truth if we didn't at least have one. Imagine the show is about drafting rookies and we get 0. But Chase Brown there's nice, and to get Brooks as well. I've drafted a lot of Brooks before the injury. I've drafted him where the discount has been appropriate post-injury. Myself and Sean actually drafted Miles Sanders in the 20th round of one of the FFPC drafts. I think it was on Monday, but I was actually surprised as to, I'm assuming if he's going in the 20th round over there, he's going undrafted in 18 rounds over here. And it is a situation where, Brooks is a rookie working his way in with an injury at the moment. Surely he should be like somebody who's under consideration. As much as I'm not a Miles Sanders fan, the 20th round seemed like an appealing option. So the interesting thing here, I guess, to talk about is, we're talking about the rookies. We get Jonathan Brooks. We do get a couple of comments and just some of the players that we've maybe passed on so far. But one of them coming up was that we passed on Dak there to stack with Lamb. And the reason for that is I think that, and again, people will look at this and say, well, you drafted Jonathan Brooks, who's a rookie, who's injured at the moment. Like, Dak Prescott will be a better pick. But it is a case of like projecting your team for when you're in week 11, 12, 13 and heading into the playoffs, and how you're maximizing your points on the roster. And that second running back spot with Jonathan Brooks, I think, is the way to do it. You may not get somebody with the high, like with Dak's profile, who will consistently get a certain amount of points every week, but I think you can get a combination to do something similar throughout the course of the season. We missed out on Burrow. The Burrow drafter did draft. I would have been more likely to draft Jordan Love to go with Christian Watson than I would have Dak Prescott to go with CeeDee Lamb. And that falls back a little bit to the conversation about Derek Carr, and Dak Prescott, I think, is a far better quarterback than Derek Carr. But what I would be saying from that is like that's a CeeDee Lamb bet. We're betting on CeeDee Lamb, and obviously for Lamb to hit the heights that we hope he does, Dak Prescott has to have a really strong season. But I think that when we get later in the draft, there will be some options for us to fill out the quarterback position, and the roster will look better for the Jonathan Brooks second running back spot when we build it out to say 6 running backs and then but probably 3 quarterbacks on this roster. So that would be the way I would look at it. Had you any, like, I didn't really have a strong urge there to go QB. Like my intention was to go with the running backs. I always open up the floor to, a co-manager to see what they want to do when we're on the clock rather than say, this is what we should do. So how did you feel there about passing on, let's say, Dak for that stack? I like to stack quarterbacks at, when it's price appropriate. And it's harder to do that at the turn, as you mentioned, because you're not going to get somebody falling 22 picks. Usually they might fall, 6, 7 picks. So normally I'm trying to get them beyond their ADP rather than reach for the stacks.
Yeah, and I played the same way, and I'm kind of like what you said about Dak, is I'm not a super huge Dak believer. I feel like he's very up and down. He has a good season, and then or just the Cowboys in general. Hopefully no Cowboys fans are out there, but it seems like it's same with my Browns. They get a little hype up, and then they seem to face plant, and then when there's no steam behind them, that's when they seem to kind of
power up.
And there's no basis, there's no informational basis behind that. That's just literally just me and how my mind thinks about those teams. But I don't even know what I'm at Dak, but I know it's probably way below market, probably below 5%. Even, I'm probably I get CD anytime I can. So basically, I think I'm, 12% on him or so. I usually draft CMC first, but anytime I can get CD after that. So I'm pretty high on him, but like I said, I generally am not stacking CD and Dak because there's just a lot of quarterbacks later that I feel like offer the same amount of upside as Dak, I guess. Which I could be wrong, and I'm 100% willing to say that,
Yeah, and I was going to say kind of might become more, obvious as we get through these next 3 or 4 rounds. But for example, if we had passed on the second running back, and people may think that a different running back would have been more preferential there, but since that, the players basically that I all mentioned that go in that range have all gone. So Singletary, Javonte Williams, Spears, Corum has even gone at this point. So if we pass on that second running back there, you start to get into a lot of trouble. So most of my builds are trying to get 3 quarterbacks between rounds kind of 12 to 16 rather than getting them at that their particular point based on the opposite value you can get on your roster at the other positions that you can't really get in those later rounds. So we are 1 pick away. How are you looking at this one? Purdy was somebody who I was going to talk about if he had got another couple of picks, but he didn't. But how are you feeling here with the options? Running back here, there's a lot of players I don't like. Jerry Jeudy is a wide receiver that I have been drafting a lot of, but I don't think that we need to do that with him. Is there any other names that you're really looking at here?
Unstacked. I'd like both the Tua and Trevor Lawrence, but
scroll down for me for 1 second, can you?
Yeah, we have the correlation with Goff with Ayuk.
Do you want to take Charbonnet?
We can.
I think I would take Charbonnet as the first pick here.
Okay.
Have you an option for the second pick that you want to go with? I think I would still push quarterback here. The only problem is the running backs aren't that exciting. The running back that I would probably say to draft would be Nick Chubb or Trey Benson. How I'm leaving it up to you here though. How do you want to do it? For 16 seconds.
It's kind of a rough one. If I were drafting on my own, I'd probably I'd probably go Dowdle. Honestly, I don't feel great about him, but those are the two.
You're at the control. You're at the control. You can do it.
Yeah. So, the thing is I'm not 100% confident that Dallas even has their running back one on the roster right now.
You're at the controls, and I don't want to force the pick, but yeah, I think there's another shoe to fall with that situation at the moment. Maybe even Royce Freeman gets the run at it. But the other player that I mentioned that I've been drafting a lot, and I'm interested in your thoughts now because you're Cleveland Browns fan. If I was drafting this solo, I would have drafted Nick Chubb if we had taken a different running back over Jonathan Brooks. I was a little bit reluctant to go Brooks and Chubb when you're taking in, without a established running back at the higher end of the board. Have you been drafting Chubb, and is there a reason that I have drafted too much of him?
I don't think so. I mean, especially as he's literally one of my favorite players to watch, obviously as a Browns fan, but I only take him when he falls because, he's getting so much hype, right? I mean, he was getting, there's the one video that came out with him where he was dead, or he was squatting 500 some pounds, and the bar was looked like it was going to break, and
bar's made of jelly.
Yeah. So I just don't, I feel like it's too much hype, like it's too much steam, where I don't feel like the results that we see on the field will match the amount of hype that's coming out of those videos. But I still,
you don't think this is Adrian Peterson 2.0?
I hope it is. I hope it is, and I hope you're right. But like at ADP or before ADP, I've been kind of shying away. If he falls, I'm very happy to take him. But I feel like he needs to fall before I feel comfortable taking him.
Yeah, one of the things that I would be saying on that particular pick is something that I've been trying to work on over the last probably 3 weeks is when I'm drafting with a lot of these friends and we're doing co-drafts, and there's certain players that maybe they mention as oh, I would take him here, or and I'm kind of like, well, I've drafted him 0 times. What am I missing? So there is one of my biggest elements of drafting is we're going to be wrong on a lot of this stuff, but when you're drafting with other people, is taking opening that door, opening that window to see maybe what you are potentially missing at that particular point off draft. So I haven't really been drafting Dowdle, mainly because of the note that you gave there, that maybe he isn't the caliber of back to be a 3-down backer to take over that backfield. But again, when we get those 4 running backs in a row, he could give us those early season points to bypass what we have to get from Brooks in those weeks, and that could be the difference then, and the rest of the team having enough to push it forward. So I'm not and the other thing I like, we have those 4 running backs so far, all separate. We talked about bye weeks, all separate bye weeks for those running backs, which gives you more flexibility when you get to say 5 or 6 and you're like, how many more do we need, when they're not all crossing over each other. That's beneficial. So we did do a little bit of a reach on Charbonnet there, but realistically the players that I would have wanted outside of that were Jerry Jeudy, and then the other one that has gone is Wendell Robinson. But we have enough wide receivers at this point, I think. The player that I've started to also draft recently that I hadn't really been in on at all is Jalen Polk. He did go 3 selections after that. Have you been drafting much of the Patriots this offseason, or how are you feeling on the Patriots offense? I haven't been drafting a lot off it at all, but I've been starting to move into some Polk shares recently.
Yeah, and the same here. And then you see there's been a lot of highlights on social media of Javon Baker catching passes. So I actually wrote both those up and more through a dynasty lens, both the New England rookie wide receivers. And my initial stance was kind of to fade Baker a little bit. So maybe I might be wrong on that, because if social media and one clip highlights of one play of practice tells you anything, that guy's
that's how you have to make that's how you have to make your decisions. I was joking with Sean Siegel after we recorded RotoViz Overtime this week that I was after seeing another clip of Xavier Worthy catching a deep touchdown from Mahomes, basically unchallenged again, which seems to come up once every couple of days now. But it's either you can take your decision from that, or you can take it from the one clip that went around where he got pushed over at the line of scrimmage. They're the 2 options. Which side are you on? The deep touchdowns or the falling over? But it's so much kind of an echo chamber on social media. Nick Chubb nearly got back to us. He did go 3 picks before. I would have definitely made the pitch there to do that. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence and Tua at the last round. They are still here, so I'm opening the door here for that. I like J.K. Dobbins. I like Tyler Algier. You know who else I like? I like T.J. Hawkinson. I like injured players. I used to shy away from injured players so much, but recently I've drafted a lot of rosters with those 2 guys on it. We are on the clock, though. How are you feeling here about the options available?
I mean, I feel like I mean, I know quarterbacks falling is not always, the ADP values aren't always
Yep.
like the best thing to go for, but I feel like Tua here is kind of a no-brainer. I
Yep.
don't know how you feel about it.
No,
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
And
So we
then,
have him. Then the second option becomes: do we want a second tight end? Do we want to get Algier or J.K. Dobbins? That's probably where I'm looking with the
mhm.
options here. How are you feeling all around that?
Well, I know you like TJ Hawkinson a lot, and I've been drafting a lot of TJ Hawkinson too. I feel like even if he's not his full self at the end of the year, he doesn't need to be his full self to be a top 10 tight end. So
Yep.
I'm happy taking him if
Okay.
that's the route you want to go.
Yeah, we get a split by week. Obviously, I was trying to remember who the first tight end we drafted was. It was Dalton Kincaid. I believe it's week 12 for the Bills. Just doing
Yeah.
doing some mental maths. So we're good there. I like Hawkinson just in terms of like he's kind of the way I'm looking at Chubb and Hawkinson when I'm talking about those injured players who are not necessarily going to miss the whole season, and they may miss the opening 6 weeks, but they may be back also, and in some of those cases sooner.
Mhm.
The way I'm kind of looking at it is the Justin Fields play. Like I've talked and drafted Justin Fields all off season, and even at times like when they were talking about punt returns and kickoff returns for him, I was thinking like it was really I was like, well, maybe this is a lost bet that I'm doing. So I did come back a wee bit from it, but it's the same sort of thing. Like we're going to see if he's the starting running back for the season. If we know that, say within the last week of preseason, and these here contests, he's going to be going, in the 8th, 9th round, I would imagine, just because of his profile in terms of his rushing ability. And he's somebody who at the moment or earlier this offseason, like was like, 18th round, 17th round kind of play. And the same with Hawkinson. Like if Hawkinson was healthy, he's going up in that George Kittle range. And you're getting him then in this here situation we got him at the 1301. So that's kind of how I'm building it. It's like there's a risk there, but the upside is not factored into the risk that you're taking. It's like it feels like a risk that's worth betting on.
Absolutely.
So him, Chubb, and Fields was the other one that I kind of took kind of stances on that were kind of a little bit over the top. But I will admit I am a TJ Hawkinson truther. So that's also part of it. So now we're up to 2 tight ends. We get Tua as a quarterback who's obviously unstacked. That might lead us into looking at like a Darrell Washington potentially later if we wanted to, but we can see how it works out. We could also get a third tight end, get Johnny Smith down there. But the other part that is interesting is I did see some reports today with Odell Beckham that some kind of fears with the Dolphins that he maybe kind of pretty much got a retirement package from them and won't be out there to play. They were wondering, was it the Will Fuller contract that he got? Because Fuller had numerous kind of finger injuries and never got on the field. And a season or a summer where I drafted a lot of Will Fuller that summer.
Too. So
yeah.
you're not alone.
Yeah. But I do think Tua there is way underpriced. And I talked about it earlier at the quarterback position. We passed on Dak. Looking at now, I know we don't have a stack with Tua, but he was a player we talked about 22 picks earlier, and he made it the whole way back, or 24 picks earlier. That's how I like to play quarterback, is like rather than being like, oh, I have to get this guy right now, trying to do it that way. And I think we could be in quarterback conversations potentially as it comes around here in this next round. And I also talked about Fields. He could come into the conversation here as well. But Geno is somebody who I'd be interested in when it gets to that particular point. I have to talk about Bo Nix every time I'll draft Bo Nix.
So keeping that in the back pocket too, because there's we go 3 tight ends. There's a guy that we both are very fond of that I wouldn't mind taking in the 18th. So
I do not have enough off that guy Greg Dulcich, and I have quite a bit off him. And it's like this season off season on RotoViz Overtime, I've kind of been like trying to get Sean to draft Greg Dulcich, and it's kind of like, oh no, that ship has sailed on Greg Dulcich, and I want to draft him this week on that draft that I mentioned that we took Nick Chubb. Eventually, I got him to draft Greg Dulcich, so we got him in an OT team, but I have him on quite a bit of solo teams as well. But again, players who have the profile to jump dramatically up and not just like be at their ADP, but absolutely crush it. So we are coming up here too, 5 picks away. We've Jaleel McLaughlin, who would be interesting. Marshawn Lloyd is there, another rookie. And then Geno Smith is there also. How are you? I keep asking the same question. You know, I could just leave a space, but who are you hoping that gets to us? I guess I'll say.
These top two guys right here, McLaughlin and Lloyd,
Yeah.
those are the two. I mean, I don't think it's a hamstring injury, but I don't think it's overly serious where they're
No.
thinking he's going to miss the season or the beginning of the season. So
Yeah, the only downside to that could be, you know, that he doesn't get many reps in the off season, and then maybe they hold him back a bit in the, you know, the opening part of the season. But the other thing is the other running backs will unfortunately get banged up as well, as will he. But that might open up to some reps for him. Braylon Allen's after going off at the 14-10. He's a running back that I would have been interested in potentially adding in. Although we don't want anything to ever happen to Breece Hall, Allen is very interesting. Do you want to get both running backs and see what happens with quarterback? See where it rolls after that. I don't necessarily think that we massively have to stack Gino. Now we have the option for both running backs.
I think we should go with both of these guys and
see if he falls down. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm 100% okay with that because I think there's still a few other options at the end. And I mean, it's a big thing right now is talking about structurally. You know, are we okay with the 6 wide receivers? Because if we're looking for, you know, 3-6-6-3, it's either we roll with the 6 wide receivers and feel more comfortable at quarterback and tight end, or we have to make some tough decisions about if we're just going to roll with Kincaid as an elite tight end and hopefully he produces every week while Hawkinson's out.
Yeah,
you know,
so I think the way it plays here for us is we have the flexibility to do it. Outside of quarterback, we need an additional quarterback, but
absolutely,
we can see kind of what comes and what options play our way. If there's nothing that tight end, for example, that gets wiped out at that certain point, we can obviously go a different direction. But Jonnu Smith did go, who I had mentioned, but again, a play that I like to put with Tua, but I'm not convinced it's you know going to happen. We've seen how Miami have used tight ends kind of throughout the run here with this offense, and they're using, like, it's an amazing offense, but tight end isn't a focal point. But the only problem with that would be if it was made a focal point this season, like Jonnu Smith would be an absolute smash, just in terms of the athletic profile that he has. But yeah, dream wise here, which I'm not expecting them to continue to get that far. If we get another quarterback, basically a round and a half after ADP, that would be delightful. But Geno Smith would fall in. Throw up the full draft board till we see how teams are set up at QB. Is there a chance? I think we may be the only one quarterback team that's rolling here on this board.
You're looking at
click that square. So we have us and everyone else across the board. Yeah, team in 7 seems to be
only have one so
far.
One,
but that might mean there's a chance. So Mayfield has gone off the board. So yeah,
and his one QB is Josh Allen as well. So I mean, or whoever the team at 7 is probably just looking to roll with the elite QB. Maybe he just wants to get over contrarian and just roll with one.
The dagger could be here if it does make itself work back around. The drafter in 2 at the 102 is the DK Metcalf drafter. That would be quite the dagger if that was to be the case. But again, I'm comfortable with the alternative options, the likes of next, as I mentioned, and Derek Carr, who we talked about earlier, Daniel Jones, Justin Fields. We're going to be safe. We're going to be fine.
Yeah, I feel we're okay. I mean, obviously, we would prefer, a little bit more stacking, but I mean, sometimes
it goes like you can prefer stacking. You can also prefer, a 2-round discount on your quarterback.
Amen.
There's ways that it can play out. I just think if we look when this draft's over at the players we've drafted, Gino did go. The talent that's on this roster is, it's quite fantastic. What I wouldn't be against doing at this next turn if it was to work out that more of these names get back to us. I wouldn't be against going, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, one of those two, and Bo Nix, for example. Wouldn't be against any of those kind of to get up to 3 quarterbacks and then see what makes its way around. I do feel like it's risky with TJ Hawkinson. I feel like this might end up being a 2 tight end team based on how we've pushed it. But if I'm looking here at the ADP on rotoviz.com, there is somebody who is going completely undrafted. And his name is Greg Dulcich.
Yeah.
So
Well,
he could be our Mr. Irrelevant here if we get it. Any of those quarterbacks that you really, really want? I want Fields as one of them. And I'm okay with either of the other two. Any preference? I know Fields is going to go, so we're going to be disappointed. But
I'd say Fields
Bryce
and
Young
Knicks.
went.
Yeah, I'd say Fields and Knicks really, because Fields gives us that super high upside if he can hold on to the starting job or take it over. Yeah. And then I'm just crossing the fingers that if we take
one pick to go for Justin Fields.
I'm not going to say anything.
Give it to us.
I'm just going to shut up for a second.
Fantasy gods, give it to us. Silence. This would be a good point to put in an ad break.
Yeah.
We get Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson on that roster, so let's see.
He takes his sweet time too. There you go, Chiga Conquo.
So who do Fields and then I think you know what I think? I think we go Bo next because I think we could get Greg Dulcich as the.
I know.
How do you feel about that?
I feel good about it, and even I feel pretty good about that. So.
And on that second one with Knicks, there's scroll down through our team. There's no real. I think we're very balanced here with buys overall. We get Bo next to Jaleel McLaughlin. Let's go.
And then we have the correlation with Chase Brown too. So and Higgins. So I think it's pretty good.
We've where our strategy has been fully revealed when we've got to the 1701. We're stacking the Broncos. That's pretty much for anyone who wants to watch any of my drafts. That's the strategy.
The preferred route, and I know I've talked about it on streams before, but like I was not on Bo Nix until I read that piece that Sean put up on the site before. I think it was pre-draft because he was doing the Rookie 101 series, but right before that he put the Bo Nix piece, and I was not on him whatsoever. And that it's like when you can read an article and it completely changes your frame of mind on a player. Yeah. Like that's when you know that like that is a good article. Yeah. So anybody
Bo Nix is going to be fun, and I just like the situation. I'm. You talked about the situation a couple of seasons ago when it was Geno Smith, and like we were really repping kind of that Seahawks offense, which nobody was very excited about. Well, I really feel like the Denver Broncos are this year's version of that, where these players are all ascending in value together, and they're vastly underpriced. So Jaleel. I was joking with this. With Connor O'Driscoll, one of the teams we're drafting, sometimes we get into issues where I'm obviously in Ireland and people are in America and the time difference and so on and the overnight clocks, and you could run out of time with the 8-hour clocks. Well, the situation came up that Connor drafted Jaleel and we already had Javonte, but we were talking it through after, not something I've done before, but we're like, maybe that's what you need because we have seen Sean Payton with the Saints have those two running backs just destroying things in fantasy football. But yeah, Jaleel I like, Javonte, pretty much all the wide receivers. I'm just trying to get all the pieces off it. The one I haven't been drafting based on cost as much as Cortland Sutton, but because I'm drafting so much Broncos, so much Knicks, I am factoring him in there as well. So I'm in on the Broncos, and a large portion of my season will go with how the Broncos do this offseason. But they for me are that mold of what when we were like trying to attack the Detroit Lions a couple of seasons ago and the Seahawks. I think that this season's version of that is Denver.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you can just add Greg Dulcich to the queue and turn auto draft on, and then we're okay. There's a bunch of names here though when you are waiting this late, like because we have that game stacked up. Mike Gesicki could potentially come back through. Tucker Kraft. The positive on Tucker Kraft is, I had thought that he may still be, a concern with his injury at this point. Seems to be, well on the way to recovery. Yeah. So he's interesting at this point. We get like Jentavious Sanders is a rookie who's interesting at this point. One of them that's here, and obviously we never want anything to happen either to Brock Bowers, but Michael Mayer, quite a bit going undrafted in this format. Again, as a second-year profile. Very, very interesting and very athletic. So the likes of him and Kraft fit into that kind of secondary tight end role with upside. And I think those two teams in Las Vegas and Green Bay will play some two tight end this season. The other one then that I would mention, like that has a really clear pathway, I feel, to the tight end one with not, somebody else in front of him is Greg Dulcich, who I think is just the priority here. Gesicki too. We talked about the Dolphins and how they use tight ends. Gesicki now in Cincinnati, they've had some huge tight end games over the last couple of years. So Gesicki maybe does get unlocked up there. He's kind of that post-hype, player that I wonder if it's just never going to happen. But we've seen it with like the likes of Evan Ingram, where we thought it never was going to happen, and then it happened, and they had over 100 receptions last season. So I'm not saying that's going to happen to Mike Gesicki, but he's still interesting at this point. So we're 4 picks away. Interesting that Sam Darnold goes at the 1807, even with the fact that like he's basically the starter now for the whole season for the Vikings. Again, a safety valve play that I think will just get more expensive as we move forward here. Gesicki did go 3 picks away. We have 3 tight end options. We also have Malik Washington in the queue, who I think is interesting as a rookie as well. But I probably we could go that way, but I think the extra tight end and Dulcich would be the play. If Dulcich went, I probably would go to Washington after that.
And he's there. Like I said, it's
I love it when a plan comes together.
And it's really following the data, because like nowhere in my mind would I ever say like going with just 6 wide receivers ever like a great idea. But you got to trust the data and you got to go with what's proven. So we got our 6 early wide receivers, and I feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, and we really did push wide receiver, and you have to be kind of thinking it through then as to how to balance it out. And if we look at the board and the detours that you could have took potentially for wide receiver, the one thing I would say is, see, when we went through that draft, I didn't see wide receivers at the top of the queue a lot of the times after the kind of 10th round, where I was like, oh yeah, the wide receiver is the better pick here over the running back, or the wide receiver is the better pick over the tight end, or the wide receiver is the better pick over the quarterback. It felt like, because of the way we managed this draft, we had the option to make the best pick every time. And that, the interesting thing is, I usually find the drafts at the 101 spot are really tricky because you don't get those guys back. But we were fortunate enough that we got Fields back. If we look through it, like even with the situation with Fields, he went 13 picks after ADP in this draft. We get 22 picks on Tua. We take Bo Nix 10 picks ahead of ADP, but that was what we were expected to kind of do in this draft. But they were the areas where we got the real value, but that meant that then even the reach on Charbonnet, but we get Chase Brown, Jonathan Brooks, Charbonnet, Rico Dowdle, Jaleel McLaughlin, Marshawn Lloyd. I think that's a fantastic room. Get a 12-pick discount on Lloyd in that particular situation. We get a 13-pick discount on Jaleel McLaughlin on that their selection. And I don't really think there's much else. We get 5 picks on T. Higgins, for example. Everything else is pretty much around the range that they would go. But yeah, I really like how this turned out. Yeah.
Right here, Colm.
Yeah,
this is the guy right here.
4-pick discount on Greg Dulcich.
And he's the one who's going to blow up in the BBM finals, and
The other thing, we get 3 quarterbacks, 3 tight ends, no crossover. I think we have 1 week. I think Charbonnet and Lloyd have a week 10 crossover. So nothing else there running. Positionally, we're quite clean in terms of players available, even with bye weeks and injuries, that we should be able to manage through. And to go without a running back until pick 96. So we get 96, 97, 120, 121, 168, 169. But to go without a running back and then to get Brown, Brooks, Charbonnet, Dowdle, McLaughlin, and Lloyd, I think that is really, a lot of built-in upside, because you get the 2 rookies who should be kind of backloaded in terms of their points coming towards the end of the season. We get a solid kind of backup with some standalone value in Charbonnet. We have somebody who could be the starting running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, and Chase Brown. We get Jaleel McLaughlin, who's, I think, a very good pass catching running back. We get Rico Dowdle, who apparently is the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys. We'll do quotation marks for that one. But again, I think a fine pick for the running back room that we haven't. We haven't talked about them since, I think, round 7. But tell me who the wide receivers are again on this roster.
It's been so long.
I can't even forget. I can't even remember who they're probably, to be honest, since we drafted this, they're probably all injured. It's that long ago since we drafted them.
Oh, yeah. So we had CD Lamb in the first, second round Devontae, third round Ayuk, fourth round T Higgins, and that's when we jumped and picked Kincaid. So that was our only non-wide receiver pick in the first 7 rounds. Then we hit up JSN and Christian Watson at the end. And how are you feeling about Watson going forward? I've been more deferring to Jaden Reed and Wixer have been the two Green Bay wide receivers that I feel like are the best ADP values. But like Watson, he's explosive and he has those spike weeks. So I kind of like waffle back and forth, I guess, on Watson in that
The
range.
injuries is what's been the kind of tough thing with Watson. He's missed so much time, and there's reports about him working on different ways to have less hamstring issues this season. If
Mhm.
the hamstring issues are tidy up, he's so good. Like the thing, he's kind of got dinged because of that, but I think it's about buying into the Packers offense. So you get the Packers, you get we have two of them obviously built in, but with the Lloyd pick as well. But the way it works out, and I did hear LaFleur talking this week, saying like it infuriates him when somebody asks about who's the wide receiver one, because basically like he Devontae Adams was the star of the Packers, and it was kind of troubling for him to run his offense because between him and Rodgers, the target was to get the ball to Adams, and he wants to like have his offense break the other team's defense rather than like our first read is to our wide receiver one. He wants to have it that you really can't decide who you're covering with your number one cornerback. And I think that's the way the Packers are set up. Like they're going to have all different routes for all different receivers, and they're probably going to have Romeo Dobbs as kind of that X receiver for contested catches and things like that. And he's probably going to be out there more than the other guys, which makes him in that situation valuable as well. So I think they're all valuable. Jaden Reed would be my preference. You mentioned Wicks. I've drafted quite a bit of Wicks this offseason because of the cost. But in drafts recently, since I've seen the practice reports and I've seen the clips where I was joking earlier when I was talking about clips of this and clips of that and people overreacting to clips, but Christian Watson, sorry, seems to be looking very, very healthy compared to what he may have had issues in the other seasons. And I think you have to have access to a player like that when he's your wide receiver 6 and you're getting him at the spot he gets. I think if you have a roster where maybe you have 2 running backs at that point, it's a trickier click. But when you're getting him as your wide receiver 6, I think it's just all day, every day, get him on the roster.
Mhm. And my biggest thing is when I do click Watson, I'm not looking for consistent production. I feel like he has a lot of those spike weeks. He's a lot of up and down. So when I do make that click, that's kind of what I'm like,
That's what you're expecting, but there's
yeah.
also the possibility that he just comes in and this season like he has 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. Like that is something that he could do. Like if you're looking at like physically him versus Jaden Reed, like if I was playing Madden, I know which one I would be like putting out there, for example.
Yeah.
But that's where the LaFleur offense is very interesting, and I just think the Packers are going to explode this year. Like the way they
Oh
play,
yeah.
I've like been. I loved watching Rodgers play, and I have loved all those teams. But because of the lack of expectation, a bit like you were saying with the Browns, sometimes like when you don't have expectations, the season didn't start off great, and you're like, well, this season's going nowhere, and then just down the stretch, they were just crushing it. And obviously, they go into Dallas and beat the Cowboys, and then they nearly beat the 49ers. Like it felt like there was nothing they couldn't do. But that was a team. This is a good way to finish this show. Speaking of rookies, that was a team that was pretty much like 80% rookie players. And those players now are entering their second year and they're going to take the leap. And you want them on your fantasy roster, but the Packers are going to do that in real life as the team ascends kind of together here. So it's going to be fun. Any final thoughts though as we get ready to close this up? I've loved this draft. I'm hoping that it gets a nice run in the contest. I think we've set up a fun one here.
Yeah, I really like the team too. Like I said, the 6 wide receivers is still something that I'm getting used to. But you got to
This feels
follow
like
the
something
data.
that you should do an article on. 6 wide
Yeah,
receivers
6.
win the
Oh,
contest.
let's say Jake Bowes already did, so I don't have to.
This team's
He's
going to win. This team's going to win BBM, and what people will be talking about next year is that you need
Mhm.
6 wide receivers in the
Yeah,
first
you don't
7
need any
rounds
more.
with an
You can
elite
go.
tight
Let's
end.
go 5. If six won, five's even better. So
Yeah.
hopefully everybody's drafting 5 wide receivers except for us next year.
Yeah, so fun times, but yeah, we talked about it at the start of the show, but Kevin has a bunch of articles up on rotoviz.com looking at some of the rookies and kind of comparing them to some historic performances of recent years, the likes of Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, and players like that. T. Higgins, who we drafted here, also mentioned in it. But check them out up on rotoviz.com. If you are looking to sign up over at rotoviz.com, you can use the promo code RVRadio2024 at checkout. That gets you a 10% discount off of RotoViz NFL Pass, get you access to all of the content. Some of the stuff, obviously, that Kevin has mentioned throughout this show, like Blair's work, like Michael Dubner, Jake Bowes, Sean Siegel. So much great stuff up on the website, along with the tools that I've referenced and, looking at how, to build winning lineup constructions, all available with that. And at the moment, there is a preseason discount as well. So you even save a few extra dollars on top of that 10% with RV Radio 2024. So do go over there, check that out. Everything on the site. Check us all out at RotoViz Radio. If you're listening to this over on the YouTube side, drop us a comment. Let us know what we did right or what we did wrong on this roster. I always like getting the feedback. The comments can be interesting, but I always like to take them on board. But thanks to Kevin for jumping on. We are going to try and do one of these, I believe, next Monday evening around the same time. But until we are back, my name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Overtime Ireland. Check out Kevin's work up on rotoviz.com. And until next time, have a good one.